So, how are you, Helge?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Aside from the obvious, I guess. I
Yeah,
can't leave my house anymore. But
yeah, me
I guess
too.
that
Well,
affects a lot of people in the world. So
yeah. That's
if we
obviously,
ignore that for a second, I'm doing
yeah,
great.
yeah.
How are you doing?
Yeah, same situation. Working from home, doing podcast from home, living la vida on home. So, but yeah, hopefully, hopefully everybody is safe and healthy. So, yeah, this pass soon. I hope.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think very selfishly, I can say that, for sort of introvert software engineers, even though this is a very cliche statement,
yeah,
I'll say that we usually don't have problems with working from home and sort of being just by ourselves and the computer. It's usually fine. So
yeah,
in terms of like productivity and working, and that hasn't affected me all that much, to be honest, because I work from home anyway. Um, it's more the obvious things like not being able to see the family and
yeah.
all that stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we are lucky because I mean we have internet, we have all these software platforms online that we can talk with the family and be in contact with video call like WhatsApp, Skypes, and Zoom like this, or any other technology. So you can stay in contact, and yeah, I think that's great. Unless I'm being more talking with my family way more than when was like no pandemic. So yeah, it's great.
yeah, for sure. It's been interesting. Also, my wife and I, we just were in the States for nearly 2 years, and I think our contact with the family has actually improved over that period of time, which is a bit strange, but it's because we use Skype and all this stuff like so much that
Hmm.
we sort of established this new way of communication, and now that's what we're doing. So it's
Yeah,
interesting how you learn a new way of communicating. And you're right. I think we actually are on the phone more than before,
yeah,
for sure.
that's great. So I think maybe we can start like I mean we know each other for a long time, uh, but maybe the people who is watching this or listening the podcast doesn't know you. So maybe we can start like introducing a little bit yourself or a little bit of your bio, curriculum vitae, or I don't know, journey. I think is the word nowadays. Your journey on this fantastic world of 3D and CG.
Sure. So I'm Helge. I am currently my title is senior software engineer in animation at Epic Games. But my background is pretty much production slash engineering. So all of my work career, I've been sort of switching between production studios, working with teams in R&D and film, and then also software companies. So it's been back and forth. And I suppose it's due to the desire of being part of production, but also being able to do proper software. And I don't mean this in any disrespect to any production software, but having the time to have a larger team of dedicated software engineers to the product. So it's two very sort of distinct parts of my career. Also, I want to say thank you very much for having me. It's an exciting time for
Oh
me.
no, thanks to you
Just
for
been
coming. Yeah,
I've just been able to sort of participate in the first release of Unreal, really, because I've only been with the company for a bit more than a year now. And I'll show later. There's you can see the screen, but I'll show later a bit of the details of some of the characters and this rigging system that we've built. But it's really cool timing to sort of, you know, again, selfishly, shameless self promotion of sort of saying, cool to talk to you, catch up, but also getting
yeah.
the opportunity to show the folks what we've been working on.
For me, it's the same. It's very selfish because I'm really interested in what you're doing, so it's a good excuse to to get some information first hand from you.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's win-win.
So, yeah, I can talk a bit through my bio. I don't want this to be a one-way street, so please. I think as soon as we get to six birds, it'll be pretty known to you as we've worked together there.
Yeah.
Also, want to state that it's been actually quite fun to go over the CV and go back and look for rigging work in the last sort of 10, 15 years. Yeah, it's just been interesting to see what we've worked on, what are some of the advances, and where is this domain heading. What do we think is next? What are some of the problems and workflows that we're all used to, what we all hate, that have existed for like this whole time, right? So it's kind of interesting to go back and look.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, and this is a bit maybe PR-ish, a little bit too much, but I'm surprised to be guest in your podcast. I remember like when you contacted me the first time, which is now I think November last year or something, we started talking about this already.
Yeah.
And I remember at that time I felt that I'm not a rigger, so I'm not necessarily the typical guest, I suppose, because I'm more used to building tools for riggers rather than rigging myself.
Ah.
So thanks again. I feel like a rigger now a little bit
No,
more.
but it's, I mean, it's all like, I mean, it's not only for riggers, but I mean, yeah, building the tools for riggers is also a big part, or if not the biggest part of doing rigging.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks again for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So through my work, we can go through this really briefly. I have put together a bunch of pictures that. So
Nice.
this is my first gig. I worked at in California at Automation Studios on a film that is now rated as one of the worst CG features ever. It's kind of interesting. I really liked the film, strangely, even though I worked on it. I was just straight out of college, sort of stopped before I got my degree and started to work, which I think a lot of people share. And then I was there. I started as an engineer there, and then became head of R&D, and we built like a bunch of things like asset management systems, but we also built a rigging system there. But it was really dumb. I mean, I'm sorry, but it was really simple. It was basically what we did is we built a huge Python script that would run and it would repeat the manual steps what the rigger would do. So we were working in Softimage, so we would rig and then they would record all the commands that were done, and then they would try to parameterize them, but it wasn't really, we didn't have a lot of experience in building libraries, so we didn't have really generalized like component systems or modular systems. Literally, like for every character we had a rig script, right? And the reason we did that is so we could go back and change the model and then run the rig script again. But there's obvious downfalls to this very naive approach, right? But it was interesting. It was sort of the first thing that exposed me to rigging. And I was working with the rigging influence of mine, I suppose. There's Rafael Medola, who was worked on Shark's Tale before this at DreamWorks. So it was an interesting, or Sony. I don't want to mess up the companies now. Anyway, one of the CG companies at that time, and he was working on that.
Yes,
and so he had, it should be DreamWorks. So he had a lot of experience in sort of larger scale production around rigging, but there he didn't have the team, so he sort of I learned a lot from that. We work in Softimage, so after that I actually started at Softimage. So after this film gig, I worked at Softimage for about 5 years. I worked on the ice particle system that some people will still remember for a while.
I do.
And the reason I put this here is because it's not necessarily a particle image. We did a lot of other things than just particles. We did like deformers and kinematics. Eventually, people use it for rigging. So I guess one of the learnings, and this is a big one for me from that time, happened later. It happened when I left, which is when ice became quite dominant, actually. It was really used a lot in commercials. And the learning for me was that sometimes you build a tool and you cannot anticipate what people are going to do with it, which was really cool learning, right? And the other thing that I realized is that we actually sort of built a job. It was weird. We built a system, and then later I could see job descriptions of ISTD, right? That became a thing. Like people were now like Houdini effects artists. It became a role, right?
Yeah,
so that was pretty big for me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that like that.
Yeah. After that, I work at Autodesk. So this is a slide that is publicly available around Amino and Human IK and Skyline, which is a game project. So I suppose this is the first time I was exposed to game technology. Basically, what Amino was, it was a super fast graph that computes poses, so a rig, but designed with a compiler. So it's doing code injection. It was really fast, and it could run in parallel. So you could have parts of graphs that would be separated and then run in parallel to be really quick. So it's interesting. It sort of Autodesk kept it under the books for a while, but it was a really interesting approach. And eventually now this stuff is public, so you can find it online. But you can sort of see the line, right? I was working on film, then went to Softimage, and then at Autodesk, we worked on node graphs for rigging specifically after that with a pretty great team, actually. after that, I went to Sixparts. So
Oh.
when I was working at Autodesk, I was jumping back and forth, and eventually I can't remember honestly how I found this job offer. Or somebody contacted me or something.
Ah,
Can't
I
remember.
I don't remember. I don't know who contacted you. But yeah, I remember because it was well known on the Softimage community, and I remember to having conversations there, like we're trying to hire Helge and so on. But yeah, I don't remember. But I just want to make shout out for Javier because I remember this image. Javi,
Yes.
Javi
Yeah.
Verdugo did it. It's amazing, still amazing image, by the way.
It's still amazing, yeah. I thought the art. So this is one of the learnings that I found there is that the art available in that studio was just great, right? Like from the painters to the animators, everything was really really cool. Not the riggers, Mikhail, that was you. So
Who
no, obviously,
until Jeremy arrived was just a rigging.
obviously not, obviously not. No, but
Jeremy came to fix
it
it.
was really cool to see all this passion and it didn't work out in the end, but it was
Yeah,
cool to see like all this
yeah,
talent, right?
yeah. For me, it was amazing experience. Yeah,
Yep.
didn't work out, but I will not change it. Anything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose I'd say the same. It was a really good time. We also hired onto the team after I was there. We hired Jérémy Passerin onto the
Yes.
team. I hope I pronounced that sort of
Y-
correct.
Yeah, was a
Right?
big team into this because
Yep.
also um, we on the R&D team was also I uh, just brain fart the name. It was Marco Romeo came at the end,
Yep.
and also
Juan Antonio Bleus.
yes, Juan Antonio. Juan Antonio, it's also amazing developer.
Yeah.
He had I
Yeah.
mean, kind of dream team of R&D. But
I actually interacted with both of them later, again in a different role. It was interesting, but I'll get to that. It's a small world, let's just say. If you
yeah,
interact with one person in film, you usually see them again.
yeah,
So there we were working on a film at Sixbirds called No Pets Allowed. And I guess the picture quality of this doesn't stand up for today, but what was cool is we actually built, most of the tech ourselves. So we built the rigging system ourselves, we built the hair system ourselves, a lot of the rendering integration we built ourselves. So, even though it was a small studio, it's a lot of tech, right, that we came up with. And one of the things, that I'm really proud of is that we pushed most of the largest projects to be open source.
yes,
So even though things didn't really go well with the studio, whatever, in the end, like it sometimes does, the tech and attracted a lot of talent, and I know that the biggest surviving product is Gear, right? Out of this, I would say there's other
yes,
things that were successful for a while, but Gear, given it was ported to Maya, is
yeah,
the one that has survived
yeah.
this mess, right?
Yeah,
So
by the way, the project was directed by Headless. Also,
mhm.
big shout out for Headless guys. It's amazing artist.
Yeah, the designs and the story and everything was amazing. I think it wouldn't have been like the trailer wouldn't have been as successful, obviously, without good art. Like the art is really good. So yeah. And so here I want to show like a video. This is the ultimate nerd test video, but it's interesting. I found this on Vimeo looking for this old studio. And what it is a physics integration that we added to Softimage for the studio. And the reason I show this is because of this last frame, right? Because of this ring when they fall down and they form a perfect circle. This is the first time I was exposed to art-directed physics. This is actually something that throughout my career I've been trying to push in every studio, is using physics engines but with art direction. This is not something new. You can do this in Houdini and everywhere. But it was cool for me to learn like how to do this and how to utilize it for the film so that we could do some interesting things. We used it actually, I remember, for like pouring sugar and a bunch of other things where we wanted to have simulation, but we also wanted a very particular result. And this is before, this is like 10 years ago. So Houdini might have had something like that, but most DCCs did not have really good art directed physics at the time.
Yeah, I remember the test for the sugar. That was
Yeah,
crazy.
it was crazy. Uh, yeah, we didn't really have a sand solver or anything. We did it with rigid bodies, which was insane, but it worked out in the end. Yeah. Another thing, yeah, this is another video. Again, super nerd test. It's crazy. This all was done when we were in Spain. So this is a test with rigid bodies and then forming a shape and then other objects colliding and then again falling on. So it's a typical R&D art test. You can see the difference between the headless pictures in mine. But this is cool because again, it's like this started to be something that I really enjoyed working on art-directed physics throughout the years.
Very nice. I don't remember that one. Was it on the internet? Is in this one, or was just one of yours
This
personal
is
thing?
also on Vimeo.
Oh,
On Vimeo, there's a Studio Nest R&D overview video or something, like a demo that has all these things you can go through and
yeah, I
look for
should
it
check
on
it
Vimeo.
out for all times.
Another thing that we built that I never touched on after, but you can see this ice in the background there. We built a hair system called Melena, and that was actually quite cool to see. Like, it was super art focused. It's based on the feedback from Javier Verdugo mostly and other people, and then we sort of built it in a lot of like styling tools. And the creatures you saw before, they're all styled using this. So it was cool. It was by no means a really sophisticated hair system. It wasn't. It was rather simple, but and it wouldn't scale really well. Like nowadays, for like millions and millions of strands, this wouldn't work. But the approach was cool, and it was again focused on art directability and getting really particular results with these creatures. Right? It was cool.
Yeah.
Like, I quite enjoyed the collaboration with you and Mario Reitbauer and Javier Verdugo at that time because it was very art focused. You'd come up with this thing and it's like, no, but we need these other bells and whistles, otherwise we can't do the look, right? And I
Oh,
learned a lot on user focus there, for sure.
that's really good, I think.
And then we get to gear. So this is so exciting. Like, we now are on a YouTube stream hosted by the guy who's also partially anyway
Yeah,
maintaining gear for Maya, and it's a project that started that time, which is like
yeah,
2010.
yeah.
And Jeremy designed most of it. So I won't take credit for this other than saying I pushed really hard to make it open source with the company. Right? So
Yeah.
I didn't really work on this much other than some maybe helping Jeremy with some of the core designs, but really it's his project, and he did really, really well with
I,
this.
I, I,
It's amazing.
I thought that the solvers, part of the solvers was reused from, or was all Jeremy? Like all the C++ solvers, some of them was implemented from your previous
It's
Inception?
possible. That's
I don't
possible. I don't
remember, to be
remember.
honest.
I don't remember. I know
I
that Jeremy came in with a really strong vision around modularity and how to use builders and how to use
mm,
sort of guides and stuff like that, as you can see it now in the design. And I don't know if there was code that was taking over from me. I don't think so. I think it's more I might have helped here and there on the C++ front, because I remember at the time Jeremy was just starting with C++.
yeah, and it was
But
exactly.
again, it's all his. Like, this is all his work. He's done amazing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's interesting for me because it's one step up from the automation work, which was just a long list of script commands. Like, it was simple. It was build a rig, but it was always the same one. And he started with modularity, reusability, and a real system, a framework behind it, which is
It's
really cool.
the thing is, in when it was the first iteration, Jeremy never marketed it as a framework. I knew, I mean, we knew it was a framework, but it was never said like loud, like it's a framework. It was more like it's an auto rig, and I think was a bit like not saying like enough of the system itself, like
Yep.
diminishing the real value. But it was very, I mean, in the Softimage community was like like a like a big tsunami that came, and almost everybody was using mGear. And Jeremy told me that even he received some emails from riggers complaining that they're gonna go out of job because him.
Yeah,
That was
well, that
crazy.
happens every with every big innovation, and this sounds like super arrogant, but it's true that if you're inventing something that can automate very repetitive and tedious tasks,
Mhm.
somebody's going to have less work. But the way I see it is, the hope is, of course, that you're not losing work. It's more you have more time to focus on the
Yes.
result in art, right?
Yeah.
But you're always going to get that. If you define yourself though over rigging, what a rigging system can do, then I'm sorry, but then it's not actually a very
Mm.
uh, at least you're not growing, right? It sounds to
Yeah.
me like this gives you an opportunity that you can grow and learn more things. And also, by the way, this is a framework, so you can build components for it and you can improve the system as well. So
Exactly.
it's a very, I think what happened as well is I feel Gear probably forced more people into Python, which is really
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
some of these systems, Gear and others, because it was Python accessible, people would learn Python just to deal with the system, which is good. I think it's a good result.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're here, right? Look at that.
Oh no, what's that?
What do you mean no? It's your site. So it's cool to see the if you click through and you look at the work and the stuff that has been done with it. I don't know. I just feel like it's cool to know that we work in a studio. We put stuff in open source. It grew. It was taken over from another group, and now you have like lots of studios working with that. And
Yeah.
honestly, like when I was working on another rigging system that we'll get later to later, Gear is referenced anywhere you go. People will always say
Really?
like, "Oh, is it like Gear? Is it the system that you can use on Python?" And it's become very well known, right? So
Wow.
that's pretty awesome.
Wow. I don't know. You know what? Because we don't know who downloads mGear or anything. It's all on the GitHub. So we only know the
Right.
number of downloads, but we
Mhm.
don't know who anymore. And normally people doesn't contact that much at all. So it's always surprising when I found like some people using it. Oh, you're using it? Yeah, we've been using it for 2 years. What? And
It
no single
speaks
word.
it speaks to the status of it. So my recommendation, if you want to get more contact, do it like me, put more bugs into the software, and then you get emails.
Yeah, I try my
No,
best to do
jokes aside,
that.
jokes aside, though, if you get to a certain level of polish, then yeah, communication stops because it works, and then people not contacting you anymore,
No,
right?
I don't think we get there, but we try
Yeah,
our best.
yeah. So what happened after this? So it's interesting. It career takes a turn back from production again to the software company. So the node graph looks familiar. It's not the same one, but it's also node graph. So I after the gig at Sixperts ended, I started very early on. I think it was the first hire from a second hire or something from Paul Doyle and Phil Taylor, who just started
Mm.
Fabric Software.
Yeah,
And yeah, good.
I remember you having conversations on the phone with them. Like
Yeah,
you was
I was
talking.
still in
Yeah,
Barcelona when I got hired, so I was still in Spain when I jumped on.
yeah. I remember like, oh, I have to talk with Phil or something, and I wait for you to finish the calls, and yeah, I think I'm like I don't know how to say it, like yeah, I I I never been part of the project, but I remember the project from the inception. Like
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting. It
yeah.
came along a good time, right? It was basically Phil's pitch to me was something like, what if we took the ICE framework and we made it public, available outside a sort of 25-year-old host
Mm,
architecture, which was Softimage, and
mm,
make it generic so you can not only do particles, but you can do anything with it. Being focused on flexibility and also the focus on performance. So that was a big thing. The focus is always, it has to be super fast. It has to be, without compromises fast so that you can do everything with it. And so it was really cool. So I worked on the generic bits on of the graph itself. I worked a bit on the UI, but I mainly worked in consulting. So I worked with the large
mm,
studios, worked with a moving picture company when they evaluated it. This is a picture when one of the presentations they did for us years ago now, showing how they're assembling and changing rendering scenes using Fabric. I don't have a picture of that, but I worked with Double Negative as well on reframing their rigging pipeline using Fabric. And it's interesting because Tony and Bless was at Double Negative at the time, and
mm-hmm,
Marco Romeo was at MPC. So
mm-hmm.
both of the guys from Sixperts became customers,
Yeah,
which is great. And years after, I mean, it took us a couple of years to get to the point where the customers were able to deploy it as usual with software. But it's cool to see the folks again that you just worked with before in the previous job, and then interacting with them over
yeah.
this.
Indeed, it's really small world.
It is indeed, yeah. So we did a lot of stuff with Fabric. Like this is stuff that mainly Phil worked on, Phil Taylor. He built like creatures and characters and muscle systems and a bunch of different verticals. We never really pushed those verticals to a complete solution. There were more examples of the framework. They were like, you could, if you as a customer would get Fabric, you could build a sophisticated muscle system with this or so on. Because the focus wasn't on the verticals, like the particular solutions. The focus was on the framework itself.
Mm-hmm,
So, but it's a difficult pitch if you're trying to sell something and you don't have an example, right? So we built
mm-hmm.
a lot of different examples. And out of this, one of our customers at the time, Hybrid or Hybrid in
Yeah.
Montreal, they built or they, I should say, Eric Thivierge,
Yeah,
did a point build a new rigging system called Kraken. And we eventually hired Eric on, and he became our little rigging department, which is awesome. And he continued to work on Kraken full time. So Kraken was, I did not design any of that either. I feel like all the rigging systems that flew by me and I just could help a little bit, but then somebody else did it. So Jeremy did gear and then Eric Thivierge did this. And the cool thing about that was, and I only found some images online, but basically you would be in Maya or in Softimage, and you'd have our node graph available as a subsystem, and then you could rig in that, but then you can run the rig anywhere. And the reason we got a lot of traction through this was because Softimage Autodesk had just announced end of life of Softimage, and a lot of customers were trying to transition from Softimage to Maya. They're trying to change their production over. And of course, rigging is one of those subjects where if you have a lot of tech built in Softimage, you're stuck. You have a problem, right?
Yeah.
So they started rebuilding their rig inside of Softimage in their existing pipeline using Kraken, and then they moved it to Maya and continued to work there. So it was a really interesting exercise. What we did there, let me see. So basically, this is one of the marketing materials, but basically the idea is that if you control how the rig is built and you control what the rig is running, so the Maya nodes, if you will, if you also control those, then you can take the rig anywhere, right? That's the idea. And that's what we successfully did with Kraken, which was really cool. It meant that, the resulting pose computation could be run anywhere, and the customers had control over the rig builder, the auto rig, and they also had control over what the rig is running, so all the solvers. I know that's part of true for gear, but not for everything. I know that we still a lot of times rely on normal constraints and other things, and then you're stuck in Maya.
Yeah, it's very embedded in Maya right now.
Yeah. Yeah, then one last thing I did on this, which is cool, and this is the first time I touched Unreal, in fact, is that I work with a company called Oculus Story Studio and Bernard Hauks there and Todd Taylor to integrate a Kraken builder for Unreal, so that you could build a rig in Maya, you could design the rig in Maya with Kraken, and then run the rig in Unreal. So you have the same full, high fidelity rig with all the features and the bells and whistles in the experience inside of Unreal. And the reason for this was that they were building a lot of VR content, and they needed the ability of interacting with the characters. And plotted baked FK animation was not good enough, and they needed something where you could hand, in VR yourself, hand the character a book, and then the character needs to grab the book using an IK handle correctly and stuff like that. So they wanted to run full rigs. And we did a talk about this on DigiPro 2016. How to build a continuous character rig that you can use in authoring, and you can also use in runtime the same way. Super interesting experience with them. Awesome team, really unique team. Sadly, though, the studio ended shortly after this, so they closed down. And again, one of those really super talented group of people that in the end the studio ended. But obviously, they all found really good jobs after. So that's really cool to see. Yeah. So I'm nearly done. Sorry for the long monologue bio. So then I work at Apple. That is fast to talk about because I'm not going to talk about that. It's a very secretive company, and I'm not going to talk about what I did there. However, if you look at my CV, you can probably extrapolate what the domain would be that I worked on. And then after Apple, which was about a year in California, I went to Epic Games. I moved to Cary in North Carolina with my wife and our little dog. We stayed there for about a year, and then we just moved back to Germany to my family, got a house here, and then moved here literally just before the Corona crisis started. So we're really lucky that I sort of made it into the house with all our things and the family and our little son, our little son Jasper, just in time to make it.
I didn't thought on that, but yeah, when we talked last time, I think you was like packing everything to move.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that it was almost like same time in. Yeah. Oh,
it's also because we were planning to move later. Actually, we were planning on moving in February to 2020. But then because of the house and because of that, sometimes you can't control these environments and timing. We had to move earlier, so it's like, okay, let's just go in December already. So we moved with everything and put the stuff on the ship and moved. And then honestly, like things arrive, and like 2 weeks after, everything shut down.
Shut down. Oh my god.
This is so lucky. Like I can't believe how lucky we were.
Yeah. We had also the lucky thing. We was planning vacations in Spain, and our flight tickets were canceled, but then they closed the border from Spain because it was pretty bad also later in Spain. So if I didn't have the flight cancel, maybe I still in Spain now. It would be a mess. But yeah, things are a bit a bit unlucky.
I don't know if you remember this, and it's by no means as serious as Corona, but I don't know if you remember that, Javier, you and I got stuck in Zurich once in Switzerland.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, it was when in Iceland the volcano erupted. I mean, I know this happens there more often, but it was the one, and it has this ultimately long name that I can't pronounce.
Yeah.
But it basically shut down air traffic in Europe for like a week, and we were just at FMX in Stuttgart.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to fly back to Barcelona, and for whatever reason, we had a flight over Zurich. So we flew to Zurich, and that's when they shut down air traffic, right? And then we were stuck.
Yeah.
And do you remember that we were in a McDonald's hotel?
I was about to say it. I have pictures. I have pictures
Really?
of that. Yeah.
I know that the back of the bed was the McDonald's sign. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I have a better, I think, a funny anecdote with you. We was walking on Zurich, again, like killing the time, and you, at some point, you start behaving really weird, and you cross the street without saying anything to Javier and me, and we was, what's going on with Helge? What's going on? And then you come back, and it was a Bentley that I thought was the most ugliest Bentley ever I saw, but you told me there's a special edition, whatever, I don't know, like 2 million euros thing, only 5 units in the world, what, and you didn't want to pass close because you are super fan of cars and you couldn't stand to that. It was like, what's going on?
Yeah, I had a phase with large affinity of cars.
It's
for sure.
I thought you never gonna give up on that.
I mean, I still like cars. It's just that, I don't know. If you look at what the car I'm driving now, it basically says family on it. Right? It's basically it's a family car. So.
You don't have your van?
No, I don't have the van anymore. I used to have a van that I used to move all the furniture to Spain and back. But no, we sold it. I remember because that van was actually quite fun, and we sold it to a guy that had, I think, 4 or 5 kids, and he wanted to use it to drive to the sea and just with his kids. And so I felt that is a good sort of, that story has a soul, because I know now that van hopefully still is used for family vacation. So
great.
Yeah, it was cool. I know that with that the van was stuck once in the Gótico in Barcelona between walls. So
I don't remember that. Maybe
there was we had a young intern at Six Birds, and I can't remember his name, but he moved. Yeah, Ferran.
Yeah.
And he moved between apartments, and I helped him, and he did not have a driver's license, so he couldn't really anticipate if it would work with a car or not. He was just like, yeah, there's a street, and then we went. And then I drove in, and in the Gótico, how everything is like 90 degrees. So I went in, and then the van stuck between 2 walls, and I had to back out, like, I don't know, forever.
I know the feeling, because I didn't have driver license back then, but I have it now. Indeed, I get twice my driver license, once in Spain and once in Canada, because you cannot exchange it. And now I'm driving in Tokyo, and trust me, some streets here, it's crazy.
Yeah, I cannot imagine.
I can't believe it. I'm a village guy, man. I cannot drive in these places.
I'm curious, because I've been in the country, like Cary, North Carolina is quite rural. I mean, it's a city and everything, but there isn't, it's not the same as San Francisco. And then here, I'm living totally in the country. Like here, you go to the T junction with a car, and you can just wait, and there will be nobody, like, for 20 minutes.
Wow.
So I think if I ever drive now, like if I stay here for a couple of years and I drive to Berlin or something, I will freak out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
you get used to it, right? So.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Nice,
so with Epic, as you can see, I'm fully branded. I really like the things, actually. So it's odd a little bit, because I'm relatively new to games. I mean, I played games, but I just have never worked on game technology that much. And it's a super interesting and challenging field, because everything has to be real time. So you have to think about things very differently then you might, when you have a rig in Maya that you can only play Blast because it's so
Mhm.
slow, right? So you have to have everything super fast. I did work with Oculus Story Studio years before, but it's not quite the same thing. I
Mhm.
didn't really have, it wasn't my comfort zone, let's just say. And I was working with people that have that knowledge. So it is, however, it is a cool company and they have a really cool CEO. I think you need a visionary to push technology. So you really need somebody that believes strongly in real-time technology and things it can accomplish across the technology boundary. Like, the metaverse. If you're not familiar with it, Google Tim Sweeney in the metaverse.
No,
And the other
sorry.
thing that's really cool, yeah, go ahead, please.
No,
Sorry.
I'm not familiar with that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's too large of a subject to cover here.
Oh, okay.
But it's basically allowing to use real-time technology for much more social interaction, to use it in very different ways than we used to. And Fortnite is a good example of that. Fortnite now has concerts in it and other things,
Oh,
and it's starting to become a mixed world where you have,
oh, really?
original content from Star Wars together with original content from like Nike and together with, so I'm not doing the subject justice, so I'll leave it at that. But you can go ahead and Google on the metaverse. It's really quite fascinating, and I'm a strong believer in that. I think it's awesome.
Metaverse. I will check out.
The other thing that's cool about Epic, I would say, before I start showing this work, is just for myself, selfishly, is we have large internal customers. So if you look back at my career and you look at a software company like Autodesk or Sixbirds, you were always on one side of the fence, right? You're either production or you're a software company, and both have their problems. And with Epic, we're both, which is really cool. We are a software company, but we also have a big team that's working on production. So you can, in fact, multiple teams working on different kinds of productions. And that is a really unique position because I can work in with a large software team on a feature, but then I can go and have a large customer give me feedback quickly, right? And we're very aggressively using the features we're building inside of Fortnite. So it's a really cool thing to see. It's fun. Like for me, it's a really good position to be in. Yeah, and the other thing that's I guess one last thing that's cool about Epic, sorry about this, is
Oh,
that
go
I
ahead.
get to work with Paul Doyle again. So I don't know if
Ah,
you
yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
Paul works as a director of product management for animation
Yeah.
here. So we used
Yeah.
to work together real closely, and I think between the two of us, we can push boundaries, which is cool. Like we used to do that at Fabric, and it's cool to work with people you click with. I guess
Yeah.
you can probably
Yeah.
relate to this. So, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's there now.
Yep.
I didn't announce it yet for mGear. Just a little plug here. But I'm
Hmm.
starting this month working in new components for mGear
Okay.
and some updates for games also to make it better for games mGear.
Okay.
And the components are the Epic components, and basically are based on the mannequin naming conventions and structure. So
Great.
the goal is to make like some components and some adjustments on the rigging system, so you get something that is like the standard system that you have on the
Yep.
mannequin standard for Unreal. So yeah, and David also he giving me some advice on that.
Hmm. Good. Yeah, it's. I guess that makes sense. And as we go through Control Rig, you can sort of see what I will do. A big hint in your direction eventually. I don't think you'll miss it. It will be very big. It will be like a jumbo jet flying by type hint.
In my face.
So you
Here's a
see what I
kid.
mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
so why don't we start and cover Control Rig a
Yeah,
little bit, and then
please.
I can. Uh, there's one other thing I wanted to spend some time on with you, given it's unique to have the time and to have listeners that might also care, is sort of generic rigging philosophy. And
Mhm.
maybe we should cover that briefly before we dive into the tech.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll give you my opinion, and then
Hmm.
you can tell me off and counter
No,
my data and tell me I'm wrong.
I don't dare to do that.
No, please do. So the way I see it is this, right? So rigging hasn't really evolved in the last 25 years. And I know
Mm.
this is a harsh statement, but I'm comparing it with like modeling, where we
Mhm.
started with like simple box modeling and we're now with ZBrush and super advanced NURBS on the other end. Um, we haven't really changed anything. And Maya still stands its ground. It's really good at what it does. Um, but what's interesting is that dependency graph in Maya is not actually ideal for running poses. It's sort of a necessity that's in the system, and that's what you work with. But the trouble I see with that is that the dependency graph is actually shaping the mental model on how people think about rigging, right? So you have I would dare to say, a less than ideal system for rigging, but that's what people learn rigging with. So you end up with this humongous list of workarounds and sort of interesting technical solutions. I mean, they're challenges, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not the ideal language to describe a rig, but that's the only one you have. So that's what you'll do.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's very interesting tech being built. So from ephemera rigging to, things that are built at some of the largest studios, there are some really cool things out there. It's just not the publicly available default way, and a piece of software is not the one that you would recommend, I suppose, usually. So it's interesting. And hats off to some of those projects. I felt like the ephemera rigging, every time I watched some of these presentations, I'm like, this is, it's so cool, but it seems, and I don't mean this in a negative way that much, it's just, it seems a bit like a hack on top of a system that's designed for something else. So it works, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the ideal match.
We have an episode with Raf on the podcast.
I know, I watched that one.
You watched that one because
I watched
it tried to hack it, but now it has its own evaluation system. It doesn't use the Maya one.
So that's the ultimate consequence. But that's what I meant earlier, is that it started as a hack, and then you realize you end up with Maya being the one that's driving the curves, but that's all it does. Everything else is custom, right? So we did that when we did Kraken. We replaced the runtime because we felt the one that was there was too limiting. A lot of studios do that. They use Maya as sort of a visual host with the animation curves, but then the rig is all theirs. And so you start to wonder, right? Do you need the rigging nodes for that anymore, or can you just run your system? And if you had an authoring system that has similarly powerful curve authoring, right? I'm not daring to say the same. Maya has a lot of work into it, and it's it's very sophisticated. But still, if you start to get the replacement for that, can you run your rig somewhere else? So I'll carefully hint at what we're doing and where we are with this, and show you in the call what we're doing there. So one last thing I want to mention is that it's quite interesting that we use the DG to describe our poses. And when people think about, the one anecdote or the one story I'll mention is Phil Taylor's crocodile tail anecdote. I don't know if you know about that. When you use it when we were at Fabric, you use it at a bunch of conventions, and it's a good one. It's basically, if you have a crocodile tail and a crocodile, and you want to rig the tail, you are usually, for film, like, you're usually going to rig it like multiple times. You're going to rig it with FK. You're going to build some IK solution. You might build a curve-based rig, right, or some mix of that. And then you might also have an expression-based one where you can do like curls and other things, or I don't know, like a mix of those.
Yes.
And then you have a final one, which is the blend of all the other ones. So it's a mess. It's like a huge, if you look at the hypergraph, it'll be like huge chains of nodes that just all merge together, right? And the problem with that is, of course, it doesn't scale, because if you want yet another one, you have to, build another one and blend it again. And then it grows and grows, and it doesn't linearly grow. It's actually getting slower every time massively as you add another solution. And so that's what you call the crocodile tail problem, is just, it's a scalability issue. If you have 20 animators that all want a different rig, you're screwed, right? That's the problem. And so really, also for playback, you don't need all those rigs. You usually need like a basic IK one and an FK one. That's all you need for playback. What we're talking about is, the way you interact with the character and the way the character plays back are one system in Maya. And we think we need to divorce those two systems so that you can be more flexible and more scalable, right?
Yeah.
I agree. So
with
sorry, that was my long monologue opinion.
No,
there you go.
No, but I agree with that, and it's funny because ephemeral rig is also what it does. It's not it's just like, I don't know how to say, mounting on manipulation time system that give you the behavior for manipulation, but then it falls back to very simple structure. And I think it's the right way to go, because one of the points that Raf did on the podcast, and I think it's very important, is like, it's very complex, because the rig is dependent on or the animation on the configuration of the rig. So you need to track all these channels, that if it's a FK, if it's IK, if it's one of these crocodile tail configurations of the other, and in time this may change. So it's a it's a state. You need to to be aware not only of your animation but also the state of your rig in this specific time.
Yeah. And those solutions exist at film studios. I've seen several times, right, that people build like per take rigs and things rigs they can put on top of other ones and case by case basis do. And there's all these solutions, but they tend to be really large scripted systems on top of Maya. They tend to be like, in this situation, I run this additional Python script and it does some other things, and it, so it's not I would say like it's not a generic solution. I wouldn't say it's not elegant. It's just, it's not generically applicable as a framework. It's more a case by case solution.
Yeah, it's what we have. I mean, if you check now on mGear, the classic components list, it's almost, I think it's more than 40 components now, and we have like several spines, several limbs that with different configurations, different options, depending what you want to do, style of animation, and so on. So I think that's the most clear example that I can give you. It's my own experience that you need different, you don't have one arm, you have 5 different arms.
Sure. I meant more as well as like, I think that will always be the case. It's more when you want a control setup that is not part of the rig, but you have a shot where you need it. Some companies have built a system where you can bring in the default character, but then you can change the rig only for that shot.
Yeah.
So you can add something or remove something, and then just to adapt the rig for a specific animation use case.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is what we do. For instance, on some productions, we have several rigs, and we have maybe a couple of rigs that are special for solving some shots. And the way, and especially with the way that we do it nowadays, it's like I use this what I call data-centric rigging. That basically it's a serialization of all the data as very small parts, as much as I can. So then, if you need a variant, you just change a little part and publish again the rig as a variant. But it's like compiling. I treat it more like a software. So you just
that's
compile
great.
the versions. And but it's just as you say, it's a way to manage this like situation that we have, what we have, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So that aligns really well with what Control Rig is trying to do, even though it's doing it slightly differently. But so first of all, let me give you a brief overview of what Control Rig is, where it came from, and then also say that everything that I'm going to show you is available in the release we just gave out, the 4.25 release. You have to enable Control Rig as a plugin, so you have to go into Unreal and go into plugins and enable Control Rig, otherwise it doesn't show up. And that is because Control Rig is still experimental, so we're still working on it. We're still changing it quite dramatically. So we don't call it production ready just yet, which doesn't mean you can't use it. It's more, you're not going to get a guarantee from us. We're not going to change it. But of course, we're trying to keep it backwards compatible as much as we can. So the initial need for Control Rig came out of a performance issue. So a lot of times in Fortnite or other games, people use blueprints to do mini logic, right? They'll do like, I don't know, is the character crouching, and then multiplied with this, and to figure out the height of a hip or something. And that math logic is usually done using blueprints. And then the rest is using what's called the animation blueprints, which is a dedicated system for computing animation poses, but more on a per clip, like more on a per character level, not on a per bone level. And so what's interesting is that because the blueprints run on the main thread and the animation system runs on the worker threads, now the system had to constantly wait for each other, and it was causing a bit of a performance bottleneck. And so because we didn't have a granular system to define small math operations, the team before my time, started to build Control Rig, which is a super granular system to compute parts of poses and do some math. So it started out as that. And then we now moved it into a more generic evaluation system. So I'd like to clarify, like, it's not a auto rigger. It's not what Gear is on the auto rigging side. It's only the evaluation side. So it's only for running solvers, right? The auto rigging, and here's the hint, Mikael, I don't know if you can hear the jumbo jet flying by. What we can't do yet is auto rigging, but we have Python for everything, just so you know. So you can do everything in Python. You can build rigs in Python. You can build skeletons in Python.
Sounds like mGear.
So mGear, I like it. Yeah. So it's basically everything's available for you to drive with Python. But we haven't worked on any auto rigging or anything like that yet. So we have several customers who are like using JSON or something to serialize information and then build the rig in in Unreal that way, right? So it's yeah, there's not one larger system that has attacked this yet, like with auto rigging. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
mGear, I like it. So if even nobody watches this on YouTube, this is already worth it. So that's great.
Yeah. No, I damn it. It's not a contract yet.
I know. I know. Then one big difference is that controlling is not a dependency graph. I'll show you that as I demo it, but it's something to realize is that the nodes are not waiting for each other. They're not a pull system and they don't have caches that way. It works a bit differently. Basically what they do is they compile, right? They look at this like a recipe and then they compile a list of instructions for a virtual machine that runs. The other thing that's important as well is that the hierarchy, like the bones and the controls and the stuff I'll show you, they're not part of the rig. They're just the data that's going through the rig. So the metaphor I tend to use is if you have a deformer, the points are not part of the deformer. The points go through the deformer and they change over time, right? And so you can run the same deformer on lots of different meshes. And this is the same idea, is that the rig is a function that changes the pose, and you can run it on multiple characters at the same time. So for example, if you have 10 characters, you can just use a one rig on all of them. You don't have to have 10 rigs in memory for them.
I see. Wow.
Yeah, it's because we have a lot of characters in games. We have to think about attacking this system like a blend between the hero character animation system and a crowd system. It's very much the same thing for us.
See, so the system, it's what it's called technically like just-in-time compilation. So it prepares something when you execute, or it's not the same.
Yes.
It's not the correct term for that.
Yeah, it's a just-in-time compiler. I'll show you that how it works. You can change stuff and you can see the changes immediately, right? You can also use it as a normal compiler, but I can show you that. Let's see, is there anything else to cover? So one of the other things is that the scenarios we're looking at for the system. So we using this for virtual production, right? So for motion capture, retargeting, some of those things, runtime rigging for games. So what we mean by runtime rigging is when you already have a pose in an animation clip, let's say, and the character's already running, but you need to change some things. Like you need to change where the feet are, or you need to correct something. You can use a small rig, right, to fix certain things in animation. So we use it for that a lot in Fortnite. We do that a lot. We have some characters that have more than 3 bones in the leg. So like we have a werewolf in the game and some other things.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that demos. If the people it's curious, in the Unreal Engine YouTube channel, they have a few demos of the wolf. And I also remember I saw one demo showing how to like drive animation from the base rig. So I think they show like a girl. I don't know. It's one of your colleagues that shows. It's a girl that has like a iron fist, and it's you can configure your character so it drives the animation like based on.
Yeah, this is a bit older content, so it's a bit unfortunate that our development speed is pretty fast. So you'll see that from the demos from GDC 19 and what we have now is a bit different. But that content is still valid. You can still build stuff like that where you have say one valid pose and you just have secondary things that need to adapt. The example with the Iron Fist was like you already have hand animation, you have this other prop that sits here which is a larger iron hand, and you automatically sort of having it follow the pose. So if you will, it's manual retargeting, right, in this case.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to make my homework before the podcast, so I try to watch as much as I can.
That's fine. Yeah, this is the first time we're actually talking about this publicly this way with the current system in 425. So I would be surprised if you find any other video that already is showing what I'm showing.
So that's an exclusive. That's amazing.
It's not exclusive. We're going to talk about it somewhere else, but you know.
No, what I mean, like the first one. So
cool. So I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do with control rig, and I'll show you how to set up a rig, and then we'll build some things. I can show you 2 characters that I have available. And then I can also talk about what we call the animation in engine initiative, which is basically what I've tried to mention earlier. Is if you have a rig and you have the animation system for it, with curve editing and everything, then you don't need to go back to the UCC, the classic one anyway. So you can do all the work directly in the engine. That's the idea. So let's see here. So let's go ahead. You can still see the screen, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to work on the mannequin initially. So the mannequin, here's the mannequin mesh. I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is one of the default characters. And this is what we're currently looking at is the skeletal mesh editor. So you can see the textures and the things on him, etc. So what you can do in the content browser now, once you have the plugin enabled, so if you go to Window Editor, sorry, Edit Plugins, and you search for Control Rig. Sorry, I just changed my screen resolution, so all the windows are huge. So 1 second. So you put like Control Rig in here. You can see that I've enabled the plugin. So if you enable it, you need to restart the editor, and then you can get all the things I'm going to show you. So you right click on this and you choose Create Control Rig. You can also do this differently, but for the sake of the demonstration, this is what I'm going to do. Basically what this does, it does a bunch of things. It creates a new asset that's follows a naming convention. So it's now called, SK mannequin rig control rig, mannequin _ control rig. And then it sets up the rig editor for you. So what it has done, it has imported all the bones. You can see the hierarchy here. And down here, which is the window we're going to get to several times, which is called the rig hierarchy window. It's set up the first event. So this is the event that happens every frame. And then it's also set up the preview setting. I'm actually going to have to move my, you don't see that, I suppose, but I have to move my zoom window.
Let me move also my zoom window.
I moved it to the bottom right now.
Okay, I'm moving also bottom right. Oh.
Okay, cool.
So like that.
So it's also set up the preview mesh. So that what you see in here is what you would expect. Now, one of the things to explain is that Control Rig doesn't actually hard link to this character. It's just we're using this as a preview so you can see what kind of character, what would be the result of the rig with this character. But it means that in the future, you can just change the character you're going to apply the rig to here, if you have multiple, and then see what the rig would look like if you have another character. It's important to understand that they're separate things. Like rig is separate from the mesh itself. They're just, the rig is a function that you can apply on the character. So what I'll do is I'll hit compile first once, and then it will connect everything. And then what we've added in 4.25 is what's called the auto compile mode, which is defaults to on, which now every change that will happen will be compiled just in time, and you will be able to see the change. So let's go ahead and build a small animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some animation to the spine. So I can do that multiple ways, but I'll do it one of the ways I like. So I'll say I want to set the transform. In fact, I'm going to do an offset transform. So I'm going to change the bone of spine and add some transform to it. So I'll say spine 1, whatever. That's the first bone. And then I'm going to feed in some information here. So I'll just choose this to be a Euler rotation. And as you notice, if you haven't worked with blueprints yet, basically you can get contextual information. So if you want to, this is quaternion. So if you want to connect something quaternion, it will show you all the things you have available to your disposal, and it will show you contextually what you can do. Like how can you create a quaternion, right? So what I did is, I'll just do this again a bit slowly. So you go here and you type Euler, and it will show you there's a node you can connect to this quaternion, which is called from Euler, right? And it will say makes a quaternion from Euler angles.
That helps a lot because it's already filtering what you have accessible instead of showing everything.
This is a common behavior in all of Unreal. When you're in an editor, it will contextually show you. So you can try this now. So we'll just wire like 20 degrees in here, so you can see how he's leaning forward, right? So we'll just like 40 degrees. Great. And now we could carry on to create some procedural animation. So I'll go with my go-to example. So I'll put in a wave. So I'll put like a sine wave. And then I will put a timeline. So this is a time which is accumulated. So you can probably not see this yet, but he's going 1 degree forward and backward now.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to add an interpolate between so that it's a higher value. So I'll just say add interpolate here. And I will map from -1 to say -30 to 30 degrees, right? So now he's going to lean back and forward. So far nothing too exciting, but I've demoed a couple of new things that we've added. So one of the new things in 4.25 that we've added is what's called interpolate, that you can add on any value, and you'll be able to see it with this little icon. And also the label has changed. You can see now the label result changed to result map from -1 to 1, -30 to 30. And it's basically a hidden node that is in here that is doing that interpolation. But we found that when you build math graphs, you do this a lot. And so this is basically decluttering your graph and cleaning up your graph a little bit. You can also get this node out if you're curious. So you can right click and say eject, and then it will bring out the node to the world and you can see it.
It's nice. The
So that
icon
way,
is like a little spider, looks like.
we also use the same icon for debugging, so it's a bug. So
Oh.
don't criticize the icons just yet. We're still working on that.
I think it's
I thought
cool. I didn't say
it's
it's cool.
visually actually quite no, sorry, I'm not 100% happy with it, but I feel like it's visually very obvious.
Yeah.
You can differentiate it, so that's the most important, that you can see it. You see there's a little bug there, so there's something more there. If we just do this again, so I'll wire it back here, and I'll just add another interpolate again. You can also see that what you see in the details panel here, the settings, it's sort of telling you that it's what's on this line. It's trying to explain, like, this line is highlighted, so it says these settings apply to this line, right? That's basically what this is trying to say. So it's trying to say the value that's going through this line is now being mapped from -1 to 1 and -30 to 30. Anyway, so this is one of the nodes I want to show you. It's the most simple rig I could think of, and that will make this a bit more interesting. So the next thing I want to do is I want to, instead of just leaning one bone, I want to do a distribution. So I want to carefully, slowly lean him, right? This is not natural, all the way to his head. So I'll just create a new node, which is called distribute rotation, I believe. And I'll specify where it's supposed to start. So I'll say the first spine bone, and then the head. And then I'll wire this. So I'll create 2 rotations across that. So the first one will be no rotation, and the last rotation will be at the end. So I'll set this to 1 and wire this up. So what this will mean now is basically starts with no rotation and then does all the rotation. Now there's one other option you can enable or disable, which is called propagate to children. Most of the nodes have this. It basically says, do you want to move the children with the bone or not? So in this case, we do. In this case, we want to move them. So now you can see, now we're getting this guy leaning back and forwards all the way. And all of his bones are doing it, right? So you can sort of see, and I will adjust a bit I will adjust a little bit the camera speed so I can show you better, but also I'll adjust a bit the values that we're using because it's not ideal anymore. Set this to like -20 to 20. So you can see he's now leaning back and forth, and there's a nice distribution across. And now we can start looking at IK, right? So the reason I set this up is so with his hands are moving now, and we can demonstrate what would happen if you had IK on here. Do you have any questions or any interceptions?
No, for the moment, I'm trying to absorb all the information and process in my little brain.
Yep.
And no questions yet.
I'm going relatively quickly, but there's a lot to cover, and you can always go back and pause the video.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm gonna put this like 0.5 speed on the podcast. So no, just kidding. But
so basically, what we have is this function, right, that says it begins here, it does this work, and then it also uses this time value and sin value and then to Euler and then etc. to compute a new pose. And what's happening is that there's a hierarchy that's been passed through. So there's a hierarchy that's in the T-pose that comes in, changes through this function and goes out. So what this really is doing behind the scenes, the compiler is actually building a small virtual machine that's doing this work. And you can actually look at that machine if you want. And it's under this widget that's called the execution stack. So the execution stack is a list of operations it has to do. So basically it says it begins here, and you can show you when you select it, you can see it. First does this. Right, then it does the timeline. So then it does this guy. Then it copies a value from the timeline to this guy. And then it does the interpret, which is this hidden value on the line. Then it does the from Euler, and then eventually does the distribute. So it does all these operations. And it compiles those to a fast instruction set so it can run through them. So there's no graph it's been visiting or anything. It's like running through that list. So it's all pretty simple up to this. There's something else I want to show you, which is like, this is the part where it gets super nerdy. And it goes back to the work that was put into Amino and some of the things learned at Fabric, I suppose. Is that you have under the class settings, you have optimizations for the graph. So there's a bunch of things you can change. By default, it goes to maximum optimization in the game. And in the editor, it goes to, not as optimized. So you have fast feedback when you change things. So one of the things it's doing is basically copying values all the time. But in the optimization, you can fold what's called folding the assignments. So then those operations disappear. You can see that it's just a few less now. And it basically what it starts doing is start sharing the memory between those two so that it doesn't have to copy the values. So there's a bunch of other things it does, but that's a rough high-level description. There's some more settings, and you can basically make it really fast. And finally, one thing that's really cool is you can actually look at the syntax tree it's creating and copy it and inspect it. If you're really curious and you're a techie guy, you can go to something like Graphis Online or other websites, and it will show you the actual real tree that it's created and the compiler and everything.
Yeah.
We use this tool. I use this tool myself all the time for debugging. So if there's a problem, you can look at what the compiler will consume. And so this is an example where it's every node has its own. Let me show you. Wait a second. How can I get this larger? Yeah, there we go. So, oh, come on.
Only sliding.
So here you can see all the settings are values, and then as soon as you enable, for example, fold literals, it will try to share the memory between all the values which are the same. And if you go back here and paste it again, my hope is anyway that it will be less complex. So yeah, so now it's much less complex because it starts to use the same value for multiple pins on the function. It basically has figured out that, in this case, for example, the B map range setting is the same for this guy, but also for, I don't know where it's going, for some setting on the distribute rotation. So it will only put the number once in memory and then use it for all of them. So we have a lot of those folding mechanisms in there and make it more optimized, more fast and memory intensive, because you want, less memory intensive, because you want to be able to have lots of those in memory and run them at the same time for crowds. Right? So sorry, this is my ultra nerdy stint towards the compiler.
I love it. I really love it.
So for all the things you can do in the UI, adding, removing nodes, creating wires, setting values, all this stuff, we have Python support. So you can use Python to build the graphs. You can also use Python to build the hierarchy. So if you want to add, remove bones, move them in space, etc., you have Python for that as well. So that way you can completely from scratch build one of those rigs, create the asset in Python, set it up, wire it to everything. You can do all that in Python. Anyway, yeah. Let's carry on. So I'll build two more things in here, and then I can show you two finished characters. So one of the things I want to show you is IK. So I'll just add an IK node here. As you said, we have a bunch of different IK nodes, and I think it's unavoidable. There's no ultra IK that can do everything. We have a bunch of different ones, and this one is a classic two-bone IK solver. So I'll just use upper arm left, lower arm left, and the hand left, right? And by default, this will be rather broken. You can see it just sort of screwed up. You can see how the arm is stretched. So the first thing is the child bones have not moved with it. So the fingers here are still there. So I'll just enable the setting here and it will all go with it. So now you can see it's a straight arm. And that's because the effector is down there. The value it's using is down here. So
it's 0.
What we've, one of the things we've added in 425 is what's called control pin value. So even though this is just a setting here, you can right click and you can say control it. And what this will do is we'll give you a gizmo here so that you can, instead of having to type in a number, you can pull up. And you can see as I'm pulling this sets the values here. So I can pull it here.
It's something temporal.
Yeah, this is temporal. This disappears again. We also have, controls that survive this, and I'll show them next. Right, so this looks better, but it still doesn't look great, I suppose. The elbow is down there, but that's because the pull vector, so the up vector position is also down there, right? It's also here. And one of the other features I'd like to show is that we added visual debugging to this. So this is familiar to those of you who've used ICE in the past or Houdini or some of those, where you can say, visualize this in 3D. So I'll right click and say, add visual debug. And then it's going to add, I choose I don't know,
nice.
Cyan type point. So it's going to show you it's down here.
Right? You can show points or vectors.
I can go in and, yeah, you have a bunch of them. You can show a lot of things.
Wow.
Basically transforms as axes and rotations and lines and other stuff. So I'll just move it up, let's say. So we'll have it up there now. Obviously, that's still not right. It's kind of funny that he's looking up, but that's a coincidence. So I'll just right click again and say control pin value, and I'll move it to some location that I feel is better. So back here somewhere, right? This is not final. I'll just put it there so we have something. So now we're done, and we can basically disable the debug again if you don't need it anymore. But basically now we have an IK that's sort of working, but we cannot yet animate it, right? Because we don't have a controller for it. In Maya, some people call them dials or whatever, but the objects that you click on that you put the animation on, we don't have any of those yet. So I'll create one. And the way you create it is in the rig hierarchy, you can right click and you can say new, and you can either create new bones, new controls, or new spaces that are basically groups, right? So I'll say new control, and it will be down there somewhere. And I'm not going to work super exactly. I'll just put it here for the demo. And then what I'll say is this is where it's born. So I'll just say this is its initial. So this is where the control has its 0 transform. And then I'll name it hand left or something. I don't know. So now as I move this around, I have this new animation channel, and I can use it now to drive the rig. So I'll just get it in here, and then I'll wire it to the effector. Right. So now you can see the rotation isn't quite right for the hand. But now it's pinned there, and as you can see, I can now animate this guy around. So I'll put him here, set its initial again, so you can sort of see it's stuck here now. And as our guy is leaning back and forth, you can see how the hand is stuck in place. And also this control will be available in the animation system as something you can key, right? That's the idea. So I'll create another hand with a slightly different solver, and then we can move on. So the next thing I'll do is I'll just disconnect this for a moment, and I'll create another one, which is the fabric solver. So this is fabric with a K. It's not fabric with a C. So don't confuse it with, with the
it's
fabric.
just a pure coincidence with real.
Fabric with a K stands for forward and backward reaching inverse kinematics. So it's an IK solver that can work on longer chains, and it also is available as a multi-effector solver. So you can have multiple things pulling on the chain at once. So we'll just use it for now. So I'll show you what that means. So I'll start at the spine, and then go all the way to the right hand as a single IK solve. So I'll just use spine 1, and then hand right. And again, default configuration doesn't work well. So let's just first enable propagate to children, and you can see same problem. He's like reaching down, and that's not quite right. So why don't I go ahead and just duplicate the hand? So I'll just duplicate this guy, call it right, and then I'll move its initial location to the other side. So I guess minus. And then I'll pull it in and use it for this effector, right? So again, the rotation is off and everything, so I'll just try to fix that a little bit so that it makes more sense. But what's interesting about this guy now is that he has full reach. So if you pull on this guy, he is actually going to reach like that. And now if we enable our basic fabric again, sorry, our other IK solver, which is all the way over here. Why? I don't know why, but okay. Right, we'll get this hand also, but this one is going to use the simple one, right? You can see, and then we're sort of pulling him away from that. So it's just I was just wanted to do this very quick. Obviously, this is not a full rig, but it shows you the concepts. Now, finally, I'll create one more control, which will be our main control, which is called this main. And I can show you some of the settings as well that we have. So I've moved the video a bit over because I'm looking at these. I'll try to move them up. So maybe this is better. Oops, sorry. So I'll change the gizmo. The gizmo is basically the visual icon that you use. So I'll change it from the standard sphere to a arrow 4, which is this icon. And then I'll make it yellow, and then I'll scale it up a little bit. So I'll make it like 3 times larger, right? And then I've changed my mind and changed it to a thin arrow thick. There we go. So this is going to be our main control. And then I'm just going to take the 2 and move them under, right? So that if I move the hand around, both hands are going to follow. It's a bit of a mess, my rig, as you can see. But then I can just add an offset to the whole character before everything else, which is a usual practice. So I'll disable the rest. You can, by the way, the reason this disappeared is because I clicked on this with Alt. So if you click on a line with Alt, it will disconnect. And if you click with Control, it's going to take the line, you can put it somewhere else. So I'll just put another offset, the node that we used in the beginning, and I put it on the root node, which is the top bone, and I'll wire the main control there. So I'll do this before everything else, and this is going to move the skeleton with main, right? So that everything is correct, and you can scale that and everything.
That's it looks amazing, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, With these
I think so. I
bases,
think
you can do
we
a lot of
try to
stuff.
use
Yeah.
we try to use the nomenclature and everything that's familiar. So some things are different because they're in Unreal, but most of the things you will find your way. Things are also pretty well structured. So if you look at the menu here, you can see everything has to do with the hierarchy, and you can find they're all like, look at and aim. And the other thing we did is if you look for a node, like if you type in aim or you type in look at, it's going to find the aim as well. Because I took a lot of time to look at what these things are called in Blender and in Maya, and then take all as keywords for all the search so you can find things.
Yeah, it's tagged with
Good example.
keywords. Yeah.
Good example is like linear interpolate, right? You'll find interpolate, or if you type mix, you'll also find interpolate, because it depends on where you're coming from. In other systems, they're called mix, right? I think if you search for blend, it's also going to find interpolate, etc.
That's great. We still using some naming from Softimage in mGear, and some people get like what? But it's great you have this multi DCC or convention understanding.
Obviously, you can build your own nodes. Currently, you can only do that in C++, but it's really straightforward. So you can have a definition of what the pins are, and then we call these little guys pins, and then you can implement the function that runs behind it, and then you can use it everywhere. So
that's cool.
It's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Do you know if there is any like samples out there, like maybe on the GitHub or somewhere that you can check it out, like examples for these?
What the solvers look like?
Yeah, something like that. Well, I guess.
Let me.
Well, actually, Unreal Engine, it's completely open source, no?
Yeah.
So it must be
That's what I was
somewhere.
gonna say. That's what I was gonna say, but I can show you actually. So if you go into Unreal Engine, and we look at 4.25, which is the last release. So this is all public, right? And you go under Engine, you go under, let's see, Engine. Oh, it's still searching. Sorry, it's a bit slow. And then you go under Plugins, and then you go under Experimental, which is where Control Rig still is, and then under Control Rig, or you can also use the search in GitHub if you're lazy. And then you go under Source, and you go under the Control Rig module. Eventually, we'll get there. And then our units. So we call these nodes units. So this is where all the units are. So here now we see the same menu that you saw in the right-click menu. And then you can go into, say, I don't know, go back and you go into hierarchy. Let's look for the aim node. I think it's called something else. Maybe not units hierarchy. It's probably somewhere else. But anyway, why don't we look at another one? We don't have to search that particular one. So let's say the set bone offset, the one that we used. Let's use the top one. I don't necessarily care. You go in here and then you can see, right, this is what looks like. There's a function, and then inside of this function, it's doing the actual math for like setting an offset on the hierarchy. So it's not actually overly complex, and you'll find a lot of examples because all the nodes are open source. So you can just take a look at how they work.
Amazing. That's great, because people like me, we don't know. I mean, I don't know C++ that much, just a little bit, enough to do a little compile for Maya, basically, nothing else. But these kind of examples helps a lot to understand the basics and maybe to create some variations without going too crazy in a
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is the header. This is the header of the same thing, and you can see this is the type definition. So it's a structure, and then you just define all this. So you define the bone as an input, you define the transform as an input, the weight as an input. You can also specify min and maxes. You're familiar with this, I guess, from other systems. And then you can also specify additional keywords. These are the things that are used when you look for the node in the menu.
Keywords.
So search.
Great.
So this is the add bone transform. This is what it's called under the hood. And then if you right click here and you type in offset as one of the keywords, this is the one. And this is what it looks like. So if you look at transform bone weight, this is exactly what you just saw in the code. So it's honestly pretty straightforward. We try to make it extensible as we can, as extensible as we can, because we know that every company has their own solvers, right? Everybody has their own thing, and that you want to make it easy to integrate, right?
One thing, I'm sorry, I'm maybe asking stupid things now, but the Unreal Engine now, it has, like, this is a plugin system, so you do this separated from Unreal, so you don't need to recompile Unreal. You can just do your little nodes and plug it there, or how it works, this thing?
So for Control Rig, honestly, you can just create a new project, and then either you create a new C++ project where you have code in the project already, or you create a plugin, and then you just build the nodes you need in that plugin. You don't even need control rig again. Like you don't need to build any of that. You just stick normal
amazing.
425, and then as soon as the plugin is loaded, we will find those nodes and register them, and they will show up in the UI.
Amazing.
You don't have to change the control rig plugin for this to work. You can just add units. Again, we call them units in other plugins or other source code, and it should work okay. If it doesn't work, file a bug. But we have several customers that have done this, that have
I'm gonna ask you directly. Hey, Helen, doesn't work. Why? No,
yeah, that's not.
no log, no information.
Well,
doesn't work. Why?
So yeah, so that's what it is. So let me show you one last thing, and I can show you two or three rigs. And in fact, let's go back here. I want to show you one thing which I really quite like. So we have one tester who has taken one of the marketplace content, which is like several creatures. One of them is a dragon, and he's created a rig and animated it. So just wanted to show this. I don't have the rig for this, the data set, but I have this video. You can sort of see like he's set up controls and he's added some second dynamics to the wings, and it's interesting. You know, it's not a film level rig yet. It's not as complex, but it's pretty good for real time, right? And so I thought it's cool to show. Where people are headed with this. I think I have another one, which is, oh, this is an MP4. Let me actually get. Yeah, so this is the mannequin I showed you, an earlier version, which has a slightly different look to it. But yeah, it's like an animator experimenting, and I'm just showing this to prove that you can animate with it. I'm not that much of an animator other than the simple tests. So yeah. And I have another video we can run through really quickly, which is again from the same tester. It's an overview of the Dragon rig. So the video is a bit of a mess in that it's a bit unstructured. I think it was recorded during a call, but basically this is just going through the features of the rig. He's just showing. So I'll just let that play in the background. I also sped this up a little bit, so it's very fast now. But he's basically just showing stretchy IK, he's showing curves, a bunch of the features that we have. So some of the basic things you would expect in a rigging system like this. That being said, you know, control rig is work in progress, so it's still being developed, and you know, there's obvious things still missing, but you know, we'll get there. I'm quite excited about it. I feel like we now have something that can run in the game, which is very fast, and you can use it for all sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Unreal, it's getting used in many areas, not only for games, but now a lot of the well, I guess yes, the Mandalorian behind the scenes footage. It's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to the rendering team and all the teams involved in virtual production. You know, like all this stuff for me, it's interesting actually. I mean, I get to see some things internally before, but also these big reveal videos, I'm the same fan. I look at it, it's like, this is amazing. You know, I think it's awesome, and it sort of shows you the trajectory where we're going to. Right?
Yeah, I've been watched the series like a few weeks ago. We have now Disney Plus here, and
yeah,
I cannot tell when was we use. I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah, I watched it recently, and I felt that you can tell one thing. You can tell that they started to really like the system, and they really started to design the shots for the system. Like you can tell that there's a lot of shots with like skyline and just a simple setup and somebody sitting there. And I think it's like, it looks awesome. It's just, you can tell that the director started to like using this kind of system to visualize it. Right?
The way to go, you know, like.
Yeah. So I'm just going to show you the animation side real quick, and then maybe show another rig that was given to me from Andrei Suka, who's one of the Suika. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's one of our production evangelists in Germany. So this rig now we've just created, you can see this mini icon that shows you this is what the rig looks like with the controls. You can now bring it to the world. So we'll just stand him here. And what this will do, it will do a lot of things. It will bring the character to the world. We'll set up the rig. We'll also set up what's called sequencer, which is our animation system. So that just showed up in this tab down here. And it will create a track for this thing to animate. And you can see the only things you can animate on him are those 3 controls that we've added. Right? That's the controls you have. So yeah, I'll just test one of them. So I'll just test this hand, put a key here, right? And I'll just move it down, I don't know, move it back here a little bit and rotate it as well. And put another keyframe. There's lots of settings for it. You have like access to the values up here as well. And there's a special panel. So they spend a lot of time to get to like a channel box type setup. and so on. And you can also get to the curve editor of this track. So this is more like a dope sheet view right now, but you can go here and then you can open this, put it in another tab somewhere. And if you look at this now, like you can see that we now starting to have super sophisticated curve controls, and in here you'll find like all the sort of familiar things. With aligning things in terms of key shortcuts so that it's familiar, and there's a lot of filtering that is available here, and so on. So the team behind Sequencer is putting in awesome work, and there's a good overview, I believe, in the 425 release notes of the things that went into Sequencer. It's awesome. So I think if you start to use, have a larger monitor than I'm limited to HD resolution due to zoom, but if you put this like in some tab and you work with these tools, I think you can get to a point where you can do your full animation in here, right? And I think the iteration time of going back and changing the rig, we can always go back here now and change the rig, add a new control, hit compile, and go back to the scene, and it will be there because everything's referenced, right? The rigs are referenced, everything's sort of dynamic. So
the animators, they're gonna change the rigs. No.
Yeah, well, you can use code. You can use asset management. There's no way around that.
Just kidding. It's always the same complaint for riggers. Like, but yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I get rid of this guy here, yeah, go ahead and get rid of this guy and bring in this one. So this guy here is the rig we're hoping to release. I'm pushing to release this as a demo material. So it's not out there yet, but we're working on that. So basically this guy is the default biped rig that we'll distribute. And you can see it has like some of the color style that we use for the other ones. We always use blue for left and red for right side. And then we have a spine in here and IK controls. And so on. So this is already fully set up. You can always look at the rig internals, just double click on the asset and you can see how it's set up. It's a bit larger, but it's not crazy. If you think about the size of a hypergraph, right, that you would have for full biped, this seems really big, but it's not crazy. Like to me, this is totally, you can go through and learn each one, right?
That's the whole biped?
That's the whole biped, yeah.
No, I don't think that's, that's fairly clean and like straightforward. Like I don't understand what the nodes does, but if these are all the nodes or all the units that you have, it doesn't look that complex.
Yeah, and the guy who set it up put like boxes around the logical units so that the spine and so on. So this is, again, it's not a sort of film level style rig, I would say. It's still a simple rig, but it's a really good resource for learning. So I'm hoping we make it available, and then people can start to look at this and how it works and take it apart and build on top, right? That's the idea. You use this and then build your own. Another rig that I would like to show, which is actually, that's my favorite rig right now. Again, it was distributed, provided by Andreas. So kudos to Andreas Suga working on this. I've also taken the freedom to change the shader on the rig. So if you see it again somewhere else, it might look different. Apologies, I did it. I did it for readability, so you can easier put him on the table here. So I changed him to be silver instead of colorful. So what's cool about this guy, he's using a lot. What have I done? I think I screwed up a little bit. Let me restart the engine real quick. Sorry about that. So what's cool about him, he's using a lot of secondary dynamics. So if I manage to open the project again. So he's using secondary dynamics in the tail, in the arms, in the body itself, and it's kind of cool. And I want to show you that. So how you set that up in Control Rig, it's very different than what you might be used to. So put him back here and shrink him down to that, and then we'll go in here. Let's see. So there he is. So what's cool about him is that if you move like the body, that's pretty obvious. If you move the body around, you can I don't know if you can tell in the screen share, but the hands are following, and the tail in the top there is following. But you can even, when you move the main control, so if you move this guy, you can tell that the body also has secondary dynamics on it. And in fact, the body doesn't have secondary dynamics, it just has a lag. So it just follows a bit later. So the body sort of follows the main's motion later, and then these guys have actual springs. And then there's a, sort of central location compute on the body, so that when you move the legs, you sort of automatically get this initial secondary motion, which I quite like. So if you move more legs together, it's more obvious. if you move them like that, it becomes really obvious, right, that you get that. And there's a lot of other interesting controls. Like this one, for example, is using the distribute rotation node to do like curling on the tail, which I think is cool. But then you still have the IK on top that you can use to sort of position that, right? So it's kind of neat, and the setup is simple, so you can sort of see that how we did that, and I can show you in a bit in now how the setup was done.
Only to do that tail on Maya, like you have one distributed rotation like this, and then the IK on top. You will need like a few layers of connections and workaroundings.
Yeah, and it's because the reason we can do this differently is because we're a stack, so we just work through the operations, and you can change the order, right? It's up to you. It's not a graph that is waiting on each other. So if you go in here, you can see that. You can see the stack. I helped a bit on this rig, so if it looks messy, it's my fault. But this is larger than the biped, so this has some more things, but that's it. So this is the whole scorpion. So if you go to the tail, which I believe is here, yeah, you can see. So here's the tail. So you can see there's a distribute rotation node. We used that one before. And it's using this control here, what's called the curl control, this guy, as an input. So it distributes this rotation onto the bones. So as I rotate this, it's rotating them like that. So you can do twists, you can do all of the things. It's actually quite cool. And then what it's doing is actually setting the space transform of another control. So I haven't shown spaces yet, but I can show you now. Basically down here, there's a space, which is this guy, which is a group. It's at the top level. And it has a control under it, which is this control for the tip. And basically what this rig is doing is moving the control to the right space. So it first does distribute, and then it moves the control to the tip.
Yeah. I see.
And then it animates that value as an offset.
I was about to ask you that because yeah, it looks like the control on the tip, it's attached to the tail. Means that if you later move in IK, you will have kind of a cycle or something, but you really what you have is another space there that match both this, like it looks like it's together, but it's not really together.
What's cool is that you can drive all of these procedurally, right? So you can blend multiple, you can build endpoint constraints, or like it's up to you. You can, where this guy is going is not dictated by the hierarchy or the graph. You can change it over time, right? Also, you can animate this weight. So you could have situations where sometimes it's following this guy and sometimes it's following this guy. Like all this space sort of switching kind of setups are possible with this, which was key to design. So you can, it depends on you. You can put the space under the bone, or you could put it under control, or you can put it under the top, like you would in a Maya rig. You separate the chains, and then you programmatically again drive them, right? So it's up to you, really. What I quite like though is that as we're setting the space, we're not taking so what it's doing is taking the bone location of the thumb of this guy and then setting the space. But as it's doing that, it's running it through a Verlet integration. So that's giving you this jiggle, right? So as this is doing this, you can probably see this, it jiggles a little bit.
Yes.
Because the position of the bone is being simulated. So it's going through here, simulates this a little bit, and then goes there. So if we bypass this node, I think it's pretty obvious. If you sort of take this guy and move it here, right? So we skip this node. Now it will be rigid. Now it's rigid, right? And so it's interesting. This is a temporal effect that's part of the rig. And you could now again, have, I don't know, the strength of the spring exposed to control, so you can animate it, etc. Right? And we do the same thing for all the other things. So the body, for example, let me see where the body is set up. Probably here somewhere. So the body takes all the feet and interpolates. You can see this tree. So it computes the location for the body, so that all the feet, so all the feet affect where the body is. And then it does an accumulate lerp. So it does a linear interpolate over time. So it computes that position and it interpolates towards that over time, so that it gives you a lag. So as this is happening, the body takes a bit longer to get there. So it gives you this natural reaction of muscle time, right, that you have. So it's not rigid. It's like when it's just moving, the body it's hard to see.
No, but you feel it. I mean, you really feel that
I mean,
little.
I can set this value. Yeah, if I set the value down, you can see it a bit better, and it would be like super slow. But it gives this extra little bit. And of course, ideally, you would want this animatable, so you could hook this up to a control again, right, and so on. Yeah, and then there's legs, and then there's tail and the pinch tail. So I haven't shown that yet, but it has this little pinchy thing here, so you can do that.
Nice.
And so on. So again, this is not a fully blown film rig. I wouldn't say it's at that complexity level, but it's fairly complex for real time. So it's cool to see, and I don't know, I was just excited to see different results from different people. And Andreas is actually putting this on Twitter as he's learning rigging animation. He's been posting this stuff. So he's new to animation rigging and has been on Twitter just posting, this is the stuff I'm using, this is what I'm learning, etc. So I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's it. I think we're at,
I don't know how long.
1 hour and 30 minutes now. So
Really?
I don't want to bore people too much.
No.
I'm not sure actually. Maybe maybe longer.
I don't know. I didn't check the time, but yeah,
I think
for me it
we're
was fast.
way over. I think we're way over time.
And I wish I have a ton of questions to ask you, but I think that's a lot of information right now, and I don't know like what to ask now. In terms of
course.
The like for instance, we have all this like control rig, and and this is something maybe it's super silly to ask, or maybe it's already there, but sorry, my ignorance here, but for instance, we have now this system that we can fully animate here. In order to create like another complementary tools for the animators to use these rigs, it's possible. Like for instance, can we create like pickers, or like, let's say if we have these animation curves, it's possible to create like a twinner machine, something to make the breakdowns and things like that. How is that?
So as we're rolling out support for Python, what we currently have is we have support for Python and sequencer, even though I'm not 100% sure of the scope, how complete it is. So apologies for that. I don't know that off the top of my head. We have full support for Python and control rig, and as more things are laid out, you will be able to script more and more things. But it's a gradual process inside of the engine, so you'll see it come online slowly. On top of that, though, if you want to use C++, you have access to, or Blueprint, in fact, or you can do all those things in Blueprint as well. You can build custom widgets using UMG. So we have a full framework for building widgets, UI-centric workflows where you can drag and drop together pieces of widgets and so on. And then you can back them up by blueprint graphs. So you can say, when I click this button, it's going to run this blueprint. It's going to do something. So you have access to, like, I don't know, selecting a bone or something. Is a good example, right? Or selecting something, I don't know, or putting all the hands in symmetry or stuff like that. You could build those in Blueprint currently. I'm not 100% sure how you would do that with Python. Maybe there's also a path to run a Python script as a result of a button, but I don't actually know that yet. But it's good enough for experimentation, let's put it that way. I think you can get to a point now where you can build these kind of tools. It's very easy if you want to do it in C++. If you don't want to use C++, Blueprint, experiment. Of course, this means you have to learn a bunch more things, but I think it's a time well spent, because the widget system is applicable for all the other parts of the system, obviously, right? We do not have PySide or something like that available. So
it's I mean, if the people want to learn, the best place to go right now, it's the official documentation, I guess. The YouTube content right now, probably it's a little updated, still also good, but maybe there is some information changing.
So the best place to go really is, start with the release notes of 4.25. There's a bunch of pieces of information in there that show you where control rig is. Sadly, the documentation that I am in charge of is a bit outdated, so apologies for this. We're working on that. The documentation and videos you'll find from GDC 19 show you some general ideas, but the actual workflows are not necessarily up to date. So it's a bit of a tough spot. That's why we want to release. That's why we want to release the sample content. Man, all the windows are automating here. Sorry. You want to release the sample content so that you can start learning that way. But it's a bit tough right now. That's for sure. The documentation is lacking a little bit. The hope is, of course, that most of the system is simple to understand. So with some examples and some videos like this one and some more content, you might be okay for starting. So yeah. Also use our forums, right? So if you have questions, put it on a forum, and we'll get back to you there.
That's amazing, man. And yeah, the jumbo jet coming to my face with the gear thing. Definitely, I'm gonna check this one. But it's not something like with mGear, in I mean, Jeremy did the initial work, and it was I will say the most difficult one, and
Hmm.
it was just updating the things for years very slowly. So
Sure.
but definitely I want to check because it looks like really straightforward. I'm really surprised how easy it looks like to create the rigs. Honestly, it looks yeah, like very simple, in a not in a simple, but in a very approachable way to create the rigs. So that's great, and it's really powerful in terms of what you can get for like behaviors and
It's
automatizations.
also, yeah, I would lean towards the visual debug. Like it's one of the most important features because it the big difference
Hmm.
between this and something like the DG in Maya is that you can do things to a bone multiple times. You can say first turn it this way and then later turn it that way, and you could do it in phases, like
Hmm.
layers, if you will. And
Yeah.
that is sometimes hard to visualize, right? Because as you're
Yeah.
changing something multiple times, what does it look like? Which is why the visual debug is so important. Like we have a node, I haven't shown this, where you can draw the hierarchy, the complete bones.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you can do is you can just like do this, draw everything, like
Mm-hmm.
in blue, move it to the side, right? Do something else, draw it in red, move it to the side, so that you can see the phases of what's happening to your character as you're building the rig. It's just sometimes the debugging tools are really important for this stuff, right? Because it's hard to understand if you have, like you said, a perceived cycle that is not a cycle. It's hard to debug, right? So you need these visual representations of everything.
Yeah, I think more modern software. I think Maya, it's very like you say, like this DG or the parallel that this does this pre-compilation and then evaluates uh, some ways. But the way that you have this stack evaluating, I'm not very expert or at all like very experienced on. But I think I heard like on other softwares, like I think it's Cinema 4D also evaluates on the stack that you have on your I don't know if you ever use it, this one, but you
Yeah,
evaluates this way. So it's very it has the disadvantage that I think it doesn't do any like this on how do you say the just in time compilation or anything, but it's because you have the absolute control how evaluates the things following this order. You can do a lot of stuff that maybe it's very difficult to do in Maya, and it's in but you have the trade-off of the speed. But here
yeah.
you have both advantages. You have the speed and you have this control that it's really great. I think it's
The
uh
idea is that, so the reason we use a graph as what you author is because graphs really map well to the mental model of working with rigs. It just works really well. I think you wouldn't want to edit a stack. The graph
mhm,
is good and visual, and the key to the performance and the flexibility is that we have another pass, which is a compiler that takes
mm,
the graph and turns into a stack.
mm,
So I only show you the execution window for demonstration purposes. You don't ever have to go there if you don't care about it. You can work with a graph and think of it as a graph and you're fine, right? It's automatic anyway. It goes in the back end and it does its thing. But
yeah.
that's the magic why we get it to be really fast and flexible.
No, but I think it's really important to understand how evaluates or how to process this data behind
Yeah.
the curtains, because you can take advantage of that if you know how it works. I mean, in
Yeah,
many
that's
many
true.
ways. So it's important for a technical person to know that part if he's in charge of creating rigs.
It's also, I'll just fire it up while I talk again. It's also, we have a couple of visual cues that show you certain things. Like for example, if you have a node that is not wired up to the execution,
Mm-hmm.
it will go a slightly transparent.
Oh, I see. Something like it's not
So
being used like
it's not being used by the compiler, right? So for example, if you go in here, let's see if I can find an example, right? So let's see I disconnect or I skip this Verlet. Like that's just something I just did before. So you can see it's opaque. And now if I take this cable and put it here,
oh, it's
this like
transparent.
becomes transparent. But it's
Yeah,
because this is no longer needed for the rig, right?
yeah,
But you can keep it there, it's fine, but
yeah.
it does not cost you anything. The cool thing is it doesn't cost you memory, it doesn't cost you performance. You can leave it. If
Mm-hmm.
you wanted it for another design or something, you can put a comment saying this is the old design. But the compiler will say this is skipped because it doesn't matter, right? You see what I mean? Like the result
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
used, so we don't need to do this,
Yeah,
right?
it's like a
That's the idea.
leader when you have like a leader information on
Yeah.
your like a text editor or your code editor that you use. and you have
Yep.
like this import is not being used and things like that. So you have a little feedback there, like it's not used, maybe you want to clean up, or
Yeah. So if you click on this, you should be able to see this guy. You can, by the way, it's something I use sometimes for debugging. You can go up here and just sort of click down. And it's a bit hard to see now in the zoom level, but if I just click here and go down through the stack, you can see how the nodes are all highlighting.
Yeah, nice.
Kind of nice, because it tells you this is what's happening in which order, right?
Yeah.
And you can also click on this and say, where did I, like if you're rigging and you don't no longer know, like you over here, you can right click here and say focus, and then it will bring you where that is, right? Because
nice.
Sometimes,
that's very important.
If it gets bigger, you want to be able to navigate, right?
Yeah, especially I remember when I on ice, when I some situations was like you get very easily lost on the graph. Sometimes you don't know where to go, and you have compounds and you go deep. Oh no, not this one. And
I think if it's only you, it's one thing, but if you're working in a team, that's my usual problem. It's like people spatially work differently, and then they have their logic. You open it, you can't find anything. So in the execution stack, you can search, and then you can find the node that you think is the problem in the rig, and you can locate it in a 2D graph. Because
I think your memory is better than mine. When I did something in ice and I didn't touch it for a few days, like it's like lost forever.
Oh, it's the same. It's the same for me.
So yeah, having this kind of graph thing, it helps you to understand again how it was processing all this. Even I think it's clear, but yeah, it's also good to have these representations also. That's amazing. Man, that's so much I want to ask. I think maybe we should do next time. If I promise I will invest some time trying to learn these things, and maybe next release with the new stuff, maybe we can do another catch up, and I maybe can bombard you with questions that make sense, and I don't look like a stupid, silly person asking random things.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, we could do a catch up for the next release. I can show you what's new, and you can ask the questions that you have.
And that will be perfect. So yeah, I have a personal mentor.
By that time, also we can skip the boring bio part in the beginning, so we can go directly
restart.
No. I haven't learned much until then, so I can talk about the learnings. Maybe by that time we no longer have to stay at home and we have something else to talk about. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, that will be awesome, and if you can like repeat, if you not like super busy, I will very happy to have you again on the podcast.
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's awesome. I hope there's people that like it. I hope there's usefulness in this, and also feel free to ask questions. Like anything my way. I'll answer what I can, and happy to see what people come up with using the system. It's always when you build tools, you're really excited to see what people do with it.
Now I know. Before, when we worked together, I did any system, but now that I am in charge of one, it's very awesome when you get feedback from people, or like sending like, hey, I did this or did this other thing. It's a amazing feeling. I think it's the word. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's cool. It's also the one thing which is new, I would suppose. Well, I suppose it's not necessarily new. It's been like that in other companies, but it's cool to be in a dedicated animation group. I haven't been in a team which is only focusing on animation before in my career. And so at Epic, I'm part of the animation development team. And so it's really cool to have, Control Rig is not the result of my work, it's the result of the team's work. And so it's really cool to have people that are so excited and enthusiastic about animation in general. And also lots of talent I can learn from. It's really cool, and it's fun. It's as you have a passion for animation, I do too, and it's just cool to see when you find a new solution to an existing problem, and then the talent takes it and comes up with cool animations. It's fun, right? So we'll see.
Well, thank you so much, Helge. I think
thank you.
Gonna wrap here, and stay safe, please, and healthy.
You too, man.
Take care.
Take care. Have a good one. Bye.